My name is Abigail, and I'm 32. I stood outside the company's award ceremony. My work folder pressed against my chest, the Seattle chill biting my skin. Inside, warm lights glowed, laughter spilled out. But I was told to wait outside. My colleague Kara smirked. Why would we waste a seat on you? The intern Miles, who stole my project, strutted in, applauded. 5 years of late nights, and I was invisible. So I opened my laptop, typed one email, and hit send. Have you ever been pushed out when you deserved a seat? If this hits home, like and subscribe to hear how one email changed everything. I'm Abigail, 32, still reeling from that night outside the award ceremony. The sting of Kara's words clung to me like damp clothes as I drove home, the Seattle skyline blurring through my windshield. I'd been at this tech firm for 5 years, pouring my heart into marketing campaigns that pushed our revenue up 20%. My latest project, a data-driven pitch for a major client, was my best yet. I'd spent months crunching numbers, sketching ideas on napkins, waking up at 3 a.m. to tweak slides. It was mine, every piece of it. The next morning I walked into the office, my stomach knotted but my chin up. I wore my favorite blazer, navy blue, the one that made me feel sharp. The meeting room buzzed with my team laptops, open coffee cups scattered. I stood at the front projector, humming, ready to present my campaign. My slides loaded, each one a snapshot of late nights and breakthroughs. I started talking, my voice steady, walking them through the strategy. Numbers danced on the screen, showing projected growth. I felt alive, like I was finally being seen. Then Kara leaned forward, her pen tapping her notebook. She raised her hand, cutting me off mid-sentence. Abigail, your data seems optimistic. Did you double-check these projections? Her tone was polite, but her eyes gleamed with something sharp. I paused, my throat tightening. I'd triple-checked every figure, run the numbers through 3 different models. Yes, I said, keeping my voice even. The data's solid. I can walk you through the methodology. She smiled, thin and tight. No need. Just curious? The room shifted, eyes darting between us. I pushed forward, but the air felt heavier. After the meeting, I lingered by the coffee machine, replaying Kara's interruption. Was I being paranoid? I'd always sensed her edge, the way she angled for attention in meetings, but this felt different. I headed to my desk, passing Kara's cubicle. There on her monitor was a spreadsheet I knew too well. My spreadsheet, the one I'd built for the campaign with my color-coded tabs and notes. My heart thudded. How did she have it? I hadn't shared it yet. I stood there frozen as she glanced up, her face unreadable. Need something, Abigail? She asked, her voice syrupy. I mumbled something about grabbing a file and walked away, my legs shaky. Back at my desk, I opened my laptop, checking my shared drive. My files were still there, untouched, but the timestamps didn't lie. Someone had accessed them last night. I felt a chill, like the office AC had kicked into overdrive. I wanted to confront her, but what would I say? I didn't have proof, just a gut punch of suspicion. That evening I called Tessa, my best friend since college. We met at a diner near my apartment, the kind with sticky booths and coffee that tasted like burnt toast. I slid into the seat across from her, the vinyl squeaking. Kara's got my files, I said, my voice low. Tessa's fork paused over her pie. You sure? She asked, her brow furrowing. I nodded, explaining the spreadsheet, the meeting, Kara's jab. Tessa leaned back, her dark curls bouncing. Abigail, you've got to call her out. This is your work. I stirred my coffee, the spoon clinking against the mug. I can't just accuse her. I need evidence. Tessa sighed, her eyes softening. You're too nice. I've been there, you know. My old boss took credit for my designs and I let it slide. Don't make my mistake. Her words hit hard. Tessa had quit her last job after being passed over for a promotion. I saw the hurt in her eyes, the same hurt I felt now. But I wasn't ready to fight yet. I thought of my dad, his calloused hands folding laundry after a 12-hour shift as a janitor. Always show up, Abigail, he'd say, even when it's hard. I wanted to honor that, to keep pushing. I got home and pulled out a box from under my bed. Inside was a photo of Dad standing outside his old workplace, a broom in hand, his smile tired but proud. I traced the frame, my chest tight. He'd worked so hard, never complaining, teaching me to stand tall no matter what. Seeing my work on Kara's screen felt like a betrayal of that lesson. I sat on my couch, the city lights flickering through my window, and wondered how I'd let it come to this. My campaign, my ideas were being slipped out from under me, and I didn't know how to stop it. The next morning, I walked into the office with a plan to talk to Gregory, my boss. My palms were sweaty, but I'd rehearsed what to say. I needed clarity about why my project files were on Kara's screen. The office hummed with the usual clatter of keyboards and muffled phone calls. I knocked on Gregory's door, my heart thumping like it was trying to escape. He looked up from his desk papers stacked high and waved me in. "Abigail, what's up?" he asked, his tone casual, like we were chatting about the weather. I took a breath, steadying myself. "I saw my campaign files on Kara's computer yesterday. I haven't shared them yet. Can you explain what's going on?" My voice stayed calm, but inside I was a mess. Gregory leaned back, his chair creaking. "Kara's just helping out. We're reassigning the project to her and Miles. They've got fresh perspectives." I blinked, my mouth dry. Fresh perspectives. I built that campaign from scratch. Every slide, every data point, it's mine. He shrugged his eyes, flicking to his monitor. "It's a team effort, Abigail. Credit doesn't matter as much as results." I stood there, my hands gripping the edge of his desk. 5 years I'd worked under him, staying late, skipping weekends, delivering campaigns that made clients sign on the spot. And now my work was being handed off like it was nothing. I deserved to know why I said, my voice sharper than I meant. Gregory sighed, rubbing his temple. "Look, Kara's got a knack for presenting, and Miles is new blood. Don't take it personally." I wanted to scream that it was personal, that it felt like a knife in my back, but I just nodded and left my throat tight. Back at my desk, I stared at my laptop, the screen blurring as my eyes stung. I opened my project folder, scrolling through months of work. Spreadsheets I'd built at 2 a.m, emails I'd sent to vendors, mock-ups I'd sketched on my kitchen counter. It was all there, proof of my sweat and sleepless nights. I clicked on a file, my mouse hovering over the delete button, tempted to erase it all just to feel something else. But I didn't. I closed the laptop and headed to the break room, needing air. The break room was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the faint smell of burnt popcorn. I poured a coffee, the pot shaking in my hand. That's when Miles walked in, his intern badge swinging on his lanyard. He grinned, leaning against the counter. "Big day coming up, huh? I'm presenting the campaign at the ceremony. Gonna crush it." His voice was cocky, like he'd earned it. I set my mug down, the ceramic clinking hard against the counter. "That's my campaign, Miles. You know that." He shrugged, his smirk faltering for a second. "Kara said it was a group thing." I just followed her lead. I wanted to grab him by his stupid polo shirt and shake him. Instead, I turned away, my hands trembling as I poured sugar into my coffee, the granules spilling over the edge. Miles left whistling, and I stood there, the room closing in. I walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot, the cars lined up like soldiers. That's when I overheard Kara's voice from the hallway, talking to Diane. "Abigail's not cut out for the spotlight," she said, her tone dripping with pity. "She's better behind the scenes. No wonder she's not invited." Diane laughed, a nervous sound, and I felt my stomach drop. I slid into a chair, my coffee forgotten. The break room's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering like my thoughts. I stared at my reflection in the mug, my face warped in the dark liquid. 5 years of showing up, of proving myself, and now I was being erased. Kara's words echoed in my head, each one a jab at my worth. I thought of my dad again, his voice steady as he told me to keep going no matter what. But this wasn't just hard. This was unfair. I gripped the mug, my knuckles white, knowing something had to change, and soon. I woke up the next day with a headache, the kind that pulses behind your eyes like a warning. Kara's words from the break room, "Abigail's not cut out for the spotlight," played on a loop in my head. I dragged myself to the office, my navy blazer swapped for a plain sweater, like I was trying to disappear. The Seattle rain tapped my umbrella as I walked in the office air, thick with the scent of wet coats and coffee. I kept my head down, avoiding eyes, but I could feel the whispers. My desk felt like a prison, my laptop a reminder of the campaign I'd lost. The morning meeting was torture. I sat in the back, my notebook blank, while Kara led the discussion about her campaign. She clicked through slides I'd built, her voice smooth, claiming every idea as her own. My chest tightened with each word like someone was squeezing my lungs. I wanted to stand up to shout that those were my late-night breakthroughs, my endless revisions. Instead, I gripped my pen, the plastic creaking under my fingers. Nobody looked at me. Not even Diane, who'd laughed with Kara yesterday. After the meeting, I got an email from Kara sent to the whole team, but somehow missing me on the recipient list. Great work on the campaign prep, it read, praising Miles for his innovative approach. I stared at the screen, my jaw clenched. She'd done it on purpose, leaving me out, making sure everyone knew I was invisible. I forwarded the email to myself, my hands shaking just in case I needed proof later. My coffee sat cold on my desk, untouched, the steam long gone. I decided to confront Kara. I waited until the office quieted, most people at lunch. She was at her cubicle, typing, her perfect posture infuriating. I walked over, my sneakers silent on the carpet. "Kara, we need to talk," I said, my voice low but steady. She looked up, her smile tight like she'd been expecting this. "Sure, Abigail. What's on your mind?" Her tone was all sugar, but her eyes were cold. I took a breath, my nails digging into my palms. "I saw my files on your computer. You're presenting my campaign, and you didn't even mention me in the email." "Why?" She laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound that made my skin crawl. "You're too sensitive, Abigail. It's a team project. Nobody cares who did what." I stepped closer, my voice dropping. "I care. I built that campaign. Every slide, every number. You can't just take it." Her smile didn't budge, but her eyes narrowed. "You need to relax. This is how things work here. You'll get your chance someday." She turned back to her screen, dismissing me like I was a child. I walked away, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. Back at my desk, I opened my laptop, staring at the campaign files again. I clicked through my notes, my throat tight as I saw my own handwriting in the margins of a PDF, ideas I'd scribbled during a red-eye flight. It was all there, a proof of my work, but it felt useless. I slammed the laptop shut, the sound echoing in the quiet office. A few heads turned, but I didn't care. That night, I drove to my sister Hannah's place, a small apartment across town. She opened the door, her hair in a messy bun, a glass of wine in her hand. "You look like hell," she said, pulling me inside. I collapsed onto her couch, the cushions sagging under me. "They're stealing my work, Hannah. Kara's taking everything and Gregory's letting her." My voice cracked and I hated it. Hannah sat across from me, her face serious. "Quit, Abigail. This job's killing you. Dad wouldn't want this." Her words stung, bringing up Dad again. He'd worked himself to the bone, always saying it was for us, but Hannah thought it broke him. She'd never forgiven him for it. I shook my head, my hands twisting in my lap. "I can't quit. Dad taught me to keep going, to show up. I have to fight this." Hannah sighed, setting her glass down with a clink. "You're stubborn just like him. But this isn't just hard work. It's betrayal." She was right, and it hurt. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to a photo of Dad outside his old factory, his work boots scuffed, but his smile steady. I wanted to make him proud, but Kara's laugh kept ringing in my ears, mocking me. I left Hannah's place, the rain heavier now, my resolve fraying, but not gone. I got to the office the next morning, my eyes gritty from a sleepless night. The rain had stopped, but the air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me. I sat at my desk, the hum of the office louder than usual, phones ringing, voices overlapping. My inbox pinged with a new task from Gregory: print 500 copies of the ceremony programs. I stared at the email, my stomach twisting. 5 years of driving campaigns, and now I was on clerical duty while Kara and Miles rehearsed their stolen victory. I headed to the copy room, the machine's whir drowning out my thoughts. The programs spilled out, each one glossy, listing Kara and Miles as the campaign leads. My name wasn't even in the fine print. I gripped the stack, the paper edges biting my fingers. I wanted to tear them apart to scatter them across the floor, but I just kept stacking my hands mechanical. The door opened and Diane walked in, her heels clicking. "Need help?" she asked, her voice soft, almost guilty. I didn't look up. "I'm fine." My tone was flat, but inside I was screaming. Diane lingered, fidgeting with her bracelet. "Abigail, I heard about the ceremony." "I'm sorry. I knew Kara was taking your work, but I didn't say anything. I couldn't risk my promotion." Her words hit like a slap. I set the programs down, my hands trembling. "You knew?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her eyes dropping to the floor. "I thought you'd understand. We all have to play the game." I turned back to the copier, my throat burning. Diane was supposed to be my friend here, the one who'd grab lunch with me, who'd laugh about Gregory's bad ties. Now she was just another cog in this machine, protecting herself while I sank. She left the door clicking shut, and I stood there, the copier's heat warming my face. I felt like I was disappearing piece by piece with every program I stacked. Later, I passed the conference room where Kara and Miles were practicing their presentation. Through the glass, I saw Kara gesturing confidently, her voice carrying, praising our vision. Miles nodded along, his laptop open to my slides. I stood frozen, my reflection faint in the glass like a ghost. Nobody noticed me. Not the other colleagues filing past, not the intern who bumped my shoulder without apologizing. I was invisible, and it hurt more than I could say. At lunch, I skipped the break room and walked to the parking lot, needing air. The asphalt glistened from last night's rain, the smell sharp and bitter. I leaned against my car, my breath shaky. That's when Gregory called me over. He stood by his SUV, his tie loose, his face tired. "Abigail, about the ceremony," he said, not meeting my eyes. "We're tight on seats, so you won't be attending. It's just logistics." Logistics. The word cut deep, like I was a line item to be crossed off. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. He clapped my shoulder like that fixed everything and walked away. I stood there, the parking lot stretching out around me, empty and gray. Kara's car was parked in my usual spot, her shiny red sedan mocking me. I could still hear her laugh from yesterday, her "you're too sensitive" ringing in my ears. My chest felt like it was caving in, each breath harder than the last. I wasn't just losing my work. I was losing my place, my voice, everything I'd built here. The day of the award ceremony arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves, my stomach churning as I pulled into the venue's parking lot. I dressed in my best black dress, the one I wore to client pitches, hoping it would give me confidence. My work folder was tucked under my arm, a shield against what was coming. The Seattle sky was gray, the air sharp with the promise of rain. I walked toward the entrance, my heels clicking on the pavement, each step heavier than the last. The building glowed with warm lights, music drifting out, a stark contrast to the cold knot in my chest. I reached the glass doors, the chatter inside growing louder. A security guard stood there, his badge glinting under the awning. "Name?" he asked, flipping through a clipboard. "Abigail," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. He scanned the list, his brow furrowing. "You're not on here." My heart sank, but I forced a smile. "There must be a mistake. I'm with the marketing team." He shook his head, his tone firm but not unkind. "Sorry, ma'am. No entry without a ticket." Before I could argue, Kara appeared, stepping out for a moment, her red dress catching the light. She saw me and a smirk curled her lips. "Abigail, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice dripping with mock surprise. "They told you, didn't they? No seat for you. Why would we waste one on you?" Her words hit like a punch, each one sharp and deliberate. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She turned back inside, her laughter trailing behind her, blending with the applause from the crowd. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the folder digging into my side. Through the open window, I heard Miles's voice amplified by a microphone. "Our campaign redefines client engagement," he said, reciting the opening I'd written months ago, hunched over my kitchen table. The audience clapped their cheers, echoing in my ears like a taunt. I stepped closer to the window, peering in. Miles stood on stage, his intern badge swapped for a crisp suit, gesturing to my slides. My slides. My ideas. My sleepless nights. My everything handed to him like a trophy. My chest felt like it was splitting open. I wanted to scream to barge in and tell everyone the truth, but my feet wouldn't move. The crowd's applause grew louder, each clap a reminder of how thoroughly I'd been erased. I backed away, my breath shallow, and sank onto a bench just outside the entrance. The cold metal bit through my dress, grounding me in the worst way. I clutched my folder tighter, my knuckles white as if holding it could hold me together. That's when Marcus, a janitor sweeping the sidewalk, noticed me. His gray uniform was faded, his hands rough from years of work. He paused, leaning on his broom. "You okay, miss?" he asked, his voice gentle. I shook my head, unable to speak. He sat beside me, setting the broom down. "I've seen that look before," he said. "Worked here 10 years, always cleaning up after these events. Never invited inside. You put your heart into something and they act like you don't exist." His words were quiet, but they cut deep, mirroring my own hurt. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "I built that campaign they're celebrating," I said, my voice barely audible. "And they're acting like I'm nothing." Marcus nodded, his eyes kind but tired. "I fixed a busted chair for that stage last week. Nobody claps for that either." He handed me a bottle of water from his cart, the plastic cool against my palm. I took a sip, the cold shocking my system, but it didn't dull the ache. The applause from inside swelled again, and I felt like I was drowning in it, my work stolen my place, denied my voice, silenced. I sat on that bench, Marcus's water bottle still in my hand, the plastic now warm from my grip. The ceremony's music pulsed through the walls, a cheerful beat that felt like a mockery. I couldn't stay out here, not with Miles's voice still echoing my words. I stood smoothing my dress and walked back to the entrance, my folder heavy under my arm. Maybe I could slip in, find Gregory, make him see reason. The guard was distracted talking to a delivery guy, so I eased through the doors, my pulse racing. Inside the venue was a sea of suits and sparkling glasses, the air thick with perfume and ambition. I stayed near the wall, half hidden by a potted plant, my eyes scanning for Gregory. Instead, I spotted Kara at the bar, her laughter cutting through the crowd. She was on her phone, her voice loud enough to carry. "Yeah, Gregory, it's all set," she said, her tone smug. "I made sure Abigail's out of the picture. She's no threat to my promotion now." My blood ran cold, her words slicing through me like glass. I stepped back, my heel catching on the carpet, and bumped into a waiter, nearly knocking over his tray. He steadied it, giving me a quick nod, but I felt exposed, like every eye was on me. Kara hadn't seen me, but her words kept playing in my head, each one a confirmation of her betrayal. She'd planned this, not just taken my work, but orchestrated my exclusion. I moved toward the main hall, my breath shallow, hoping to find someone, anyone who'd listen. That's when I saw the stage screen flicker to a slide I'd designed, a graph I'd spent weeks perfecting. Miles was wrapping up, his voice confident. "This campaign will change how we connect with clients," he said, and the crowd erupted again, their applause a roar in my ears. I stood at the back, my folder slipping in my sweaty hands, watching my work celebrated by someone else. A colleague. Sarah turned and saw me. "Abigail." "Why aren't you up there?" she asked, her voice curious but loud enough to draw glances. Before I could answer, Kara appeared, her glass of wine in hand. "Oh, Sarah, Abigail's just here to support," she said, her smile sharp as a blade. "She's not really part of the main event." A few heads turned, their eyes flicking over me like I was an afterthought. Sarah frowned but didn't push back, and Kara's smile widened, triumphant. I felt my face burn, the room spinning slightly. I wanted to shout, to tell them it was my campaign, but my voice was stuck, trapped behind a wall of humiliation. I backed away toward a side door, needing air. As I stepped outside, I overheard Kara again, now on another call, her voice low but clear. "Gregory, trust me. Abigail's work was just a starting point. I made it shine. She'd never have pulled it off." My knees buckled and I leaned against the brick wall, the rough texture scraping my palm. Every word was a gut punch stripping away the last shred of my pride. I slid down to the ground, my dress catching on the pavement, my folder falling open beside me, pages fluttering in the evening breeze. I crouched there against the brick wall, my dress wrinkled, my folder's pages scattered like fallen leaves. Kara's voice still echoed in my head, her smug assurance that I was no threat. The Seattle night was cold, the venue's music a distant hum, but something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to stay on the ground. I gathered my papers, my hands steadier now, and stood brushing gravel from my palms. I couldn't let them rewrite my story, not after everything I'd poured into that campaign. I walked to my car, the parking lot quiet, except for the crunch of my heels. Inside, I pulled out my laptop, the screen's glow harsh against the dark. My fingers hovered over the keys, my heart racing but focused. I opened my email, scrolling through months of drafts, notes, and timestamps that proved the campaign was mine. Every late-night edit, every client call I'd handled, every idea I'd shaped. It was all there, undeniable. I started typing an email to Natalie, the CEO, my words careful but firm. "I need to discuss the campaign presented tonight," I wrote. "I have evidence it's my work." I attached files, my fingers trembling not from fear but from purpose. Screenshots of my drafts, emails to vendors, even a photo of my notebook with ideas scribbled in the margins. I paused, my cursor blinking. Sending this could change everything or end my career. I thought of Dad, his tired eyes after long shifts telling me to stand tall. I hit send, the whoosh of the email like a release of breath I'd been holding for months. Back at my apartment, I paced the living room, the hardwood creaking under my bare feet. The email was out there now, no taking it back. My phone buzzed and I jumped, half expecting Natalie's reply already. It was Tessa, my friend, her voice crackling through the line. "Abigail. What's going on? You sound off." I told her about Kara's call, the ceremony, the email. She whistled low. "You finally did it. Now don't stop. Request a meeting with Natalie. Show her you mean business." I hesitated, my fingers twisting the hem of my shirt. A meeting felt bigger, riskier. But Tessa's words lit a spark. I opened my laptop again, drafting a request to Natalie. "I'd like to meet to discuss my contributions to the campaign," I typed, keeping it professional but clear. I sent it before I could overthink, my pulse quickening. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was taking control step by step. The next day, I walked into the office, my head high despite the knot in my stomach. I wore a green blouse, one Dad had always liked, saying it made me look strong. I passed Miles in the hallway, his eyes darting away. I stopped him, my voice calm but firm. "Miles, why did you take credit for my work?" He froze, his face flushing. "Kara said it was okay. She said you wouldn't mind." His words were weak, like he didn't believe them himself. "I do mind," I said, holding his gaze. "It was my campaign." He mumbled an apology and hurried off, but I felt a weight lift. Speaking up even to him was a start. I sat at my desk, pulling up my project timeline. I organized every piece of evidence, emails, drafts, even a late-night chat with a client that sealed a key deal. My fingers flew across the keyboard, each click a reclaiming of my voice. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was building a case not just for Natalie, but for myself. The office buzzed around me, but I felt a quiet strength growing, like a fire catching in my chest. I spent the rest of that morning at my desk, my eyes locked on the timeline I'd built. Each entry was a piece of my truth, a late-night email to a client, a spreadsheet I'd refined over weeks, a mock-up I'd sketched during a power outage lit by my phone's flashlight. My fingers ached from typing, but I felt alive, like I was stitching myself back together. The office hummed around me, phones ringing, colleagues chatting, but I was in my own world, fueled by a quiet fire. By noon, Natalie's assistant replied, scheduling a meeting for the next day. My heart skipped, but I didn't let myself dwell on the what-ifs. I printed my timeline, the pages crisp and heavy in my hands, and tucked them into a new folder, one I'd bought just for this. It was blue, sturdy, nothing like the tattered one from the ceremony. I labeled it my work, the marker's ink sharp and bold. It felt like claiming a piece of myself back. I headed to the break room for a coffee, needing a moment to breathe. The space was empty, the air stale with the smell of old creamer. As I poured, Diane slipped in her face tense. "Abigail." "I heard you're meeting with Natalie," she whispered, glancing at the door. "Be careful. Kara's furious. She knows you sent something." I set the pot down, my jaw tight. "Good," I said, surprising myself with the edge in my voice. "She should know I'm not invisible." Diane's eyes widened, but she nodded like she saw something new in me. That afternoon, I prepared for the meeting. I sat in a quiet corner of the office near a window where gray light filtered through. I rehearsed my points, my voice low, practicing how I'd describe the campaign's creation. I remembered a specific moment, a rainy Sunday, when I'd cracked the client's pain point, scribbling the breakthrough on a diner napkin. That idea became the campaign's core, the one Miles had presented like it was his. I wrote it down, my pen digging into the paper, anchoring me to my truth. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom, my blue folder under my arm. Natalie sat at the head, her expression calm but unreadable, her glasses catching the light. I took a seat, my hands steady as I opened my folder. "Thank you for meeting me," I said, my voice clear. "I'm here to discuss the campaign presented at the ceremony." It was my work. I laid out my timeline, walking her through each milestone, my voice growing stronger with every word. Natalie listened, her pen tapping slowly, her eyes sharp. Halfway through, the door opened and Kara walked in, summoned by Natalie. Her face was composed, but her hands fidgeted, betraying her. "Abigail's making claims about the campaign," Natalie said, her tone neutral. "What's your take?" Kara's smile was tight, her voice smooth. "It was a team effort. I led the final polish. Abigail's contributions were minor." My stomach twisted, but I didn't flinch. I slid a printed email across the table, one I'd sent to a client with the campaign's core idea dated months before Kara's involvement. "This isn't minor," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Kara's eyes flicked to the email, her composure cracking for a split second. Natalie raised an eyebrow, taking the paper. I kept going, laying out more evidence, my voice steady despite the storm inside. When I finished, the room was silent, the air thick with tension. I closed my folder, my hands resting on it, and looked at Natalie. She nodded slightly, her face still unreadable. I stood, thanked her, and walked out my steps, deliberate. As the door closed behind me, I felt a quiet power settle in my chest like a spark catching flame. I left the boardroom, my blue folder tucked under my arm, the weight of my words still hanging in the air. The office felt different as I walked back to my desk, like the fluorescent lights were brighter, the hum of conversation sharper. I sat down, my chair creaking, and stared at my closed laptop. I'd laid out my truth to Natalie, and now I waited, my heart steady, but my mind racing. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly, each second stretching longer than the last. By mid-morning, Natalie called an emergency meeting. I walked into the conference room, my stomach tight, and saw the team gathered, faces tense. Kara sat at the far end, her arms crossed, her jaw set. Miles was next to her, his eyes fixed on the table. Natalie stood at the front, holding my printed timeline, her expression calm but firm. "We're here to address the campaign's ownership," she said, her voice cutting through the room's quiet buzz. She held up my email, the one I'd sent the night of the ceremony, and began reading excerpts aloud. Abigail provided detailed evidence of her work, she said, her tone even. Timestamps, drafts, client correspondence. It's clear she was the primary contributor. The room went still, the silence so thick it pressed against my ears. I glanced at Kara, her face pale, her fingers gripping her pen like a lifeline. Miles shifted his shoulders, hunched, avoiding my gaze. Natalie turned to Kara. "Explain your role," she said, her eyes narrowing. Kara cleared her throat, her voice unnaturally bright. "I led the team shape the final presentation. It was collaborative." Her words sounded hollow, and a few colleagues exchanged glances. I sat there, my hands folded, feeling the weight of their eyes on me. Not accusing, not anymore. Some looked curious, others uncomfortable, like they were seeing me for the first time. Natalie set the papers down. "Miles, anything to add?" she asked. He hesitated, his voice low. "I just followed Kara's lead. I didn't know the full story." His apology was soft, almost swallowed by the room's tension. Natalie nodded, her face unreadable. "Kara, you're suspended pending a full investigation. Abigail's evidence is compelling." Kara's mouth opened, then closed, her eyes flashing with something sharp before she looked away. As the meeting ended, colleagues filed out, their whispers trailing behind. A few approached me, their voices low. "I didn't know it was your work," said Rachel, a designer I'd worked with for years. Her tone was genuine, but it stung that she hadn't noticed before. Others avoided me, their footsteps quick, like they were afraid to be associated. I stayed seated, my hands resting on my chair, the wood smooth under my fingers. The room emptied, leaving just me and the echo of Natalie's words. Diane caught me in the hallway later, her eyes red-rimmed. "I should have spoken up sooner," she said, her voice cracking. "I was scared, Abigail. I'm sorry." I nodded, my throat tight. "I get it," I said, but the words felt heavy, like they carried the weight of her silence. She hugged me quick and awkward before hurrying off. I stood there, the hallway stretching out, the office's hum now a dull roar. I'd won a battle, but the war wasn't over, and the quiet around me felt like it was holding its breath. I walked back to my desk, the hallway's carpet muffling my steps, but my pulse was loud in my ears. The office felt like a different place now, the air charged with an unspoken shift. Colleagues glanced at me, some with quick nods, others with eyes that slid away too fast. I sat down, my chair cold, and opened my laptop, pretending to work. But my mind was on the meeting, on Kara's pale face, on Miles's shaky apology. I'd spoken up, and it had changed something, but I wasn't sure what. Later that day, Gregory called me into his office. He stood by the window, his back to me, the Seattle skyline gray behind him. "Abigail, I owe you an apology," he said, his voice low, almost reluctant. "I should have listened when you raised concerns about the campaign." He turned his tie crooked, his eyes tired. I nodded, my lips pressed tight. "You didn't," I said simply, my voice steady but sharp. He flinched, like my words were a physical weight, and I felt a flicker of power, but it was hollow. The next week I got an email from Natalie. The company was rescheduling the award ceremony, and I was invited to present my campaign. My heart lifted, but only for a moment. The words felt distant, like they belonged to someone else's victory. I stood in the copy room holding a fresh stack of papers and noticed my name on the new programs listed as lead. My fingers traced the ink, the letters solid, real. But the thrill I'd expected wasn't there. It felt too late, like a prize offered after the game was already lost. At lunch, I sat alone in the break room, a sandwich untouched in front of me. The fridge hummed a steady drone that matched the ache in my chest. A colleague, Jenna, approached, her tray clattering as she sat across from me. "You did the right thing," she said, her voice soft. "I'm proud of you." Her words were kind, but they didn't reach me. I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside I felt like I was still outside that venue, cold and unseen. That evening I drove to Hannah's apartment, needing her blunt honesty. She opened the door, her eyes bright with excitement. "You got your moment, Abigail," she said, pulling me into a hug. I sank onto her couch, the fabric worn and familiar. "They're giving me the stage," I said, my voice flat. "But it doesn't feel like enough." Hannah frowned, sitting beside me. "Dad would be proud. You fought like he did." Her words stirred something, a memory of Dad's quiet strength. But it also brought a pang of grief. He'd never asked for recognition, but I needed more than that. I left her place and stopped by the office after hours to pick up my new ceremony program. The building was quiet, the lights dim. I stood in the empty conference room, holding the program, its glossy cover cool against my fingers. My name stared back at me, but it felt like a stranger's. I'd won something, but the cost was heavy, the silence of my colleagues louder than their words. I tucked the program into my bag, my steps echoing as I walked out, the weight of what came next settling like dust in my chest. Weeks later, I was back at work leading a new project with a small team. The office felt lighter, the air less heavy with unspoken grudges. My desk was now by a window, a small win I hadn't asked for but welcomed. Sunlight spilled across my keyboard, warming my hands as I typed. Colleagues like Diane stopped by more often, asking for my input on ideas, their voices genuine. I answered with confidence, my words steady. But inside, I was still piecing myself together, learning to trust this new rhythm. One morning I met Zoe, a new intern in the break room. She was shy, her hands fidgeting with a coffee mug, her eyes darting like she expected to be dismissed. I saw myself in her, the me who'd once shrunk under Kara's shadow. "You've got good ideas," I told her, leaning against the counter. "Don't let anyone make you feel small." Her smile was small but real, and I felt a quiet pride, like I was passing on a piece of my strength. That afternoon, I worked on our project, a campaign for a local nonprofit. I sketched ideas on a whiteboard, the marker squeaking, my team nodding as I spoke. For the first time in months, I felt in control, my voice carrying weight. Rachel, the designer, suggested a bold color scheme, and I really listened, building on her idea. It wasn't just about being heard anymore, it was about building something together. The thought settled in me like a deep breath, calm but grounding. After work, I drove to Hannah's apartment, needing her perspective. She was in her kitchen chopping vegetables, the knife's rhythm steady against the cutting board. "You seem different," she said, glancing up, her eyes searching mine. I leaned against the counter, the smell of garlic sharp in the air. "I'm trying to be," I said. "Work's better, but I keep thinking about Dad. How he never gave up even when it cost him." Hannah paused, her knife still, her face softening. She set the knife down, wiping her hands on a towel. "He worked too hard, Abigail. For us, sure, but it broke him sometimes. You don't have to carry that." Her words stung, but they were true. Dad had given everything, his body worn from years of labor, his smile always hiding the strain. I'd been running on his rules, pushing through pain, but maybe healing meant choosing my own way. "I'm learning that," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Hannah nodded, her eyes warm, and for the first time I felt we understood each other. I left her place, the evening air cool against my skin. Driving home, I passed a park where families were laughing, kids chasing each other across the grass. I pulled over just for a moment and watched. The simplicity of it, the ease, made my chest ache, but not with pain. It was like I was remembering how to breathe, how to see the world without bracing for the next blow. I wasn't whole yet, but I was closer, and that was enough for now. I drove home from the park, the city lights soft against the dusk. My apartment was quiet. The hum of the fridge, the only sound as I slipped off my shoes. I walked to my balcony, the cool concrete grounding my bare feet. Seattle stretched out below, a patchwork of glowing windows and distant traffic. I leaned against the railing, my hands tracing its chipped paint, and let my thoughts drift. For the first time in months, I wasn't fighting or proving anything. I was just here. The next day, I visited the factory where Dad used to work. It was smaller than I remembered, the brick walls weathered, the parking lot cracked. I stood outside, my scarf fluttering in the breeze, picturing him sweeping these steps, his broom steady, despite his tired shoulders. A worker passed by, his uniform faded like Dad's had been. It was Marcus, the janitor from the ceremony night. He recognized me, his smile warm. "You're back," he said, pausing his work. I nodded, my hands in my pockets. "Just needed to see this place again." Marcus leaned on his broom, his eyes crinkling. "I heard what you did at your company. Stood up for yourself. It got me thinking. I told my boss about some broken equipment last week. First time I spoke up in years." His words landed softly like a gift. I smiled, my chest lighter. "I'm glad," I said. "You deserve to be heard." He shrugged, but his nod felt like a shared victory. Back at work, I wrote a note to Natalie, my pen moving slowly across the paper. "Thank you for listening," I wrote. "Your fairness gave me back my voice." I folded it carefully, slipping it into an envelope, and left it on her desk after hours. It wasn't about recognition anymore. It was about gratitude, about closing a loop. The office was silent and the desks empty, but the act felt right, like setting down a weight I'd carried too long. That evening, I walked to a lake near my apartment, the water still under the fading light. I sat on a bench, my journal open in my lap, its pages worn from months of scribbled thoughts. I wrote about the ceremony, the email, the fight for my place. But I also wrote about Dad, how his lessons had carried me, and how I was learning to let go of his shadow. The pen moved slowly, each word a step toward peace. I closed the journal, my fingers brushing its leather cover. The lake was calm, its surface reflecting the last streaks of sunset. I breathed in the air, cool and clean, and felt something settle inside me. Not victory, not yet, but a quiet strength, like a seed taking root. I wasn't the same Abigail who'd stood outside that venue, and that was enough for now. Months have passed since the ceremony, and I've settled into a new rhythm. My desk at the office now holds a small cactus, its spines sharp, but its green steady, a quiet reminder to stay grounded. I lead meetings with a calm I didn't know I had, my voice clear, as I guide my team through campaigns. Colleagues listen, their nods genuine, and I no longer scan their faces for doubt. I'm not chasing approval anymore. I'm building something real step by step. One morning I arrived early, the office still quiet. I opened my laptop and found an email from Natalie thanking me for my latest project. "Your insight drives us forward," she wrote. I read it twice, letting the words sink in. Not a trophy, not applause, but enough. I closed the laptop and walked to the window, watching the Seattle dawn paint the sky in soft pinks. For the first time, I felt like I belonged here, not because they saw me, but because I saw myself. After work, I met Tessa at a coffee shop, its wooden tables scratched from years of use. She sipped her latte, her eyes bright. "You're different, Abigail," she said, leaning forward. "Stronger." I smiled, stirring my tea, the spoon clinking softly. "I had to be," I said. "But you helped. You pushed me to fight." She grinned, then grew serious. "I took your advice, you know. Stood up to my boss last week. Got a raise." We laughed, the sound warm, and I felt a spark of pride for her, for us. At home, I started a new habit, cooking dinner every Sunday. Nothing fancy, just pasta or a stir-fry, the kitchen filling with the smell of garlic and herbs. It's become my ritual, a way to slow down, to savor the quiet. As I chopped onions one evening, my eyes watering, I thought about Dad. Not his struggle, but his small joys, like the way he'd hum while fixing our old car. I'd been so focused on his lessons about perseverance, I'd forgotten his moments of peace. I set the table for one, the plate warm from the stove. The apartment was still, the city's hum distant through my window. I ate slowly, tasting each bite, and felt a weight lift. The fight with Kara, the stolen campaign, the silence of my colleagues, it was part of me, but not all of me. I was more than the hurt, more than the battle. I was Abigail, and I was enough. The next evening, I sat at my desk, the cactus casting a faint shadow under the lamp. I pulled out a small wooden box one Dad had carved years ago, its edges worn smooth. Inside was a photo of him taken at a family picnic. His laugh caught mid-moment, his arm around me. I set it on my desk, not hidden away anymore. For so long I'd carried his voice in my head, urging me to push through, to prove myself. But now I saw something else in his smile, a quiet belief in being enough just as you are. I leaned back, the chair creaking softly, and thought about the journey since that night outside the ceremony. The humiliation, the fight, the slow rebuilding of my place. It wasn't about winning or being the loudest in the room. It was about standing in my truth, even when my voice shook. I'd spent years tying my worth to others' approval, to awards, to seats at tables. But worth isn't given. It's claimed quietly every day in the choices you make when no one's watching. I walked to my bookshelf, pulling down a journal I hadn't touched in months. Its pages were half filled, a mix of dreams and doubts. I wrote a new entry, my pen steady, about how I'd learned to let go of the need to be seen by everyone. The real victory was seeing myself, flaws and all, and choosing to keep going. Dad's legacy wasn't just his work, it was his courage to face each day, to find meaning in the small moments. The office has changed too. I mentor Zoe, watching her confidence grow, her ideas sharper each week. I talk to Diane again, not as allies, but as colleagues who've seen each other's cracks and kept moving. Even Kara's absence feels less heavy now, not because I won, but because I've let go of the anger. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself to breathe again. I closed the journal, my fingers lingering on its cover. The city outside hummed a soft pulse of life. I felt lighter, like I'd shed a skin I didn't need anymore. My worth wasn't in this campaign, the applause, or even the justice I'd fought for. It was in me and the quiet strength I'd found in the choice to keep building, to keep showing up, not for them, but for me. What moment made you realize your own worth? Share it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. If this journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for listening, for being here. Here's to finding our own light, one step at a time.